Let's talk a bit about what the CCP did in response to Pelosi's visit. Because obviously there was some saber rattling, but then there was also some taking the saber out of the scabbard a little bit.
Yes.
I don't know if that works for the metaphor, but like what? Yeah, save me from this. What happened?
Okay. All right. So first of all, the saber rattling transitioned to demonstrating their capabilities, some of their capabilities against Taiwan. And the exercise is not supposed to end until my time tomorrow, which is the 6th of August. So in general, most of the things that they've done have been done in the past, when there's not tension. For example, flying in the air defense identification zone, the ADIZ. The difference this time, they kind of crossed the line here, across the line there, but didn't go very far. They kind of went in and out. You know, that game where you put your foot on one side, they quickly move over, capture the flag type thing. If you touch a person over the line, then they're tagged. So they crossed the line a little bit here and there, but nothing grossly, nothing like, 30, 40, 50, 60 miles beyond the line. They just kind of crossed it and went back. So that's on the air side. Also, interestingly enough, on the air side, they really didn't have a lot of aircraft up. Over the last 3 days of the exercise, they had between 21 and 27 aircraft flying in that area. And if you recall, last year, there was a day or two that they had over 50 aircraft flying on that day. So they really didn't show the full air power picture. And some analysts say that, that doesn't bode well for them, because they really, flying 20 to, let's say, 27 aircraft is a whole lot different than flying 200 to 500 aircraft if you're going to do a raid on someplace. So they really didn't practice their Air Force abilities that much. So that's the air picture. On the sea, as you probably saw in some of the news stories, there was around Taiwan, there were patches of areas where they were going to conduct exercises, but mainly launch missiles into those areas from mainland China. So the ships themselves were in those areas, some of them to watch where the missiles landed. And there were a few ships that, again, crossed the line a little bit, but not much, between and the Taiwan Straits. So again, on the Navy side, yes, they had more ships out. They were more active, but they really didn't do a whole lot Navy-wise. Again, not hundreds of ships, so maybe a few dozen. Now, underwater, we don't know, but we do know that there were PLA Navy submarines in the Taiwan Straits. We don't know what or where they did, but it's quite possible that the Taiwan, Japan, U.S. intelligence systems that are out there were tracking those submarines. So that might have been useful for the U.S. and Japan and Taiwan to watch where those submarines go, because perhaps during the next time, if they do an invasion, they might go in the same place. So that's the other part of this whole story, is that China does all this military maneuvers, and it's a great opportunity for everybody to watch what they do and analyze what they do, because they might do the same thing during wartime or during an invasion. So that's the submarine part. Missile part, again, according to reports, mainly from Japan, the Japanese MOD reported that there were 11 missiles that were launched from mainland China into different zones around Taiwan. And there were possibly up to 4, maybe more, of those missiles overflew Taiwan. But surprise, surprise, they didn't shoot them down. Why? Well, first of all, the altitude was way too high for them to be shot. If you recall, Japan has suffered the same thing against by the North Koreans. The North Koreans have fired some missiles over Japan, and those shots are so high up that you can't shoot those missiles down, because they're literally in outer space, and they're moving very fast. Taiwan didn't shoot anything. Again, if they had shot something, it could have given away their capabilities. Even though they couldn't hit it. And also, if they'd missed, it might not have been a good PR story. Uh, and I don't think they would have missed. But the main reason was the missiles were too high over Taiwan to shoot them down, and they weren't going to land in Taiwan. If they were going to land in Taiwan, I honestly believe that the Taiwanese um, indigenous missile defense systems, as well as they have Patriot, could have shot down those missiles if they had landed in Taiwan. So that's the missile area. In the space area, there was some stories that the U.S. had done some. Again, I can't confirm this because I don't know for sure, but there was some stories that the U.S. had jammed some of the Chinese satellites so that they couldn't get a real picture of what's going on in the area. I don't know if that's true. On the cyber side, there were some cyber attacks in Taiwan. 7-Eleven was hit, but again, this is not unusual. Earlier this year, there were some attacks on some banks. So the cyber war is really continuously going on all the time. It's not new.
Yeah, I'm upset about the 7-Eleven attacks because I love Taiwan 7-Eleven.
I don't think the 7-Eleven attacks really disturbed their business. So you could have gotten your coffee if you needed it at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Can you still get papaya milk?
I'll look.
All right, because that's really personally important to me.
Okay. And again, none of the attacks did any permanent damage, and none of the attacks caused any kind of physical outcome. So those are the typical military areas that so far that we've seen reported that's gone on so far.
Do you think that you mentioned that missiles overflew Taiwan? Like, do you think that any of this is like an escalation of what the Communist Party has done before, or is it kind of par for the course?
Okay, so you remember when Speaker Newt Gingrich came to Taiwan in the late 90s, there were some missiles that flew from Hainan Island towards Taiwan. And some people say that one or two of those missiles overflew parts of Taiwan. If that's true, then it's not a big deal. It is a big deal, though, that the target zones that they had set up, the PLA had set up some target areas on the other side of Taiwan. That's new. So in terms of an escalation, yes, the target areas were very close to Taiwan. In fact, one or two of them kind of brushed into the 12-mile territorial waters, not just the EEZ. So that's an escalation. So there were certain things that would be considered an escalation from previous times, and I believe that this was planned way in advance. The PLA knew exactly what they wanted to do, and it was waiting for an opportunity. So I suspect that part of the direction that Xi Jinping gave the PLA was, if you need to invade Taiwan, what do you need to practice? And they probably laid out what they need to practice, and they said, okay, make it happen. And so when Pelosi's visit gave them justification for doing this exercise, they were practicing things for an invasion. And a lot of discussion on the military side, in the military blogs and Twitter and all the social media and regular media, noted that these areas looked like the PLA was preparing for a blockade or some kind of a means to prevent ships and aircraft from flying into Taiwan during a crisis, which would make sense. And that's one of the 5 or 6 scenarios that the PLA has in their writings talked about in terms of Taiwan. So most military analysts have been saying that what the PLA practiced was a blockade type scenario. Now, blockade officially is between 2 countries, and so the PLA would never say that this is a blockade. It's more of a attempt to control a renegade province, but we would call it a blockade because it's preventing let's say, U.S. military aircraft from flying into Taiwan to resupply them with weapons, which could be a problem if there is a blockade and if the U.S. doesn't have the wherewithal to push the limit and try to bypass the blockade. So a blockade is a problem because one of the arguments that the Biden administration is trying to push onto Taiwan is that Taiwan should prepare for an invasion. If the PLA conduct a blockade against Taiwan, none of the weapons that the Biden administration is trying to sell Taiwan have any effect on a blockade. Ships farther than 100 kilometers away or more than 75 kilometers away can't be hit by a Harpoon missile because the Harpoon missile can only go 75 kilometers, et cetera, et cetera. So all the weapon systems that they're trying to sell are focused more on an invasion and not a blockade. And so so getting back to our conversation about what does Taiwan need to protect itself, is defending themselves in all different kinds of scenarios, not one scenario. And the Biden administration is trying to sell one scenario.
Do you think that because when you're talking about this blockade, it kind of reminds me of what the Chinese Communist Party, what the PLA has done in the South China Sea, where they start off with saying, okay, well, we're going to stop you from coming to the Scarborough Shoal. We're just going to make it so that no fishing boats that are not Chinese can come here. And then they did that in the Paracel Islands, and then slowly they started building up these artificial islands after they had blockaded, kind of like, prevented other ships from coming into the area. So is there a scenario where they could, instead of doing a like massive invasion or even like start off with like a big blockade, just like start kind of positioning themselves in the waters around Taiwan, just kind of like do that whole salami slicing type of thing that they've done in other areas? Is that a concern?
Okay, so yes, it's a concern. So that's one of the 5 scenarios, is this idea that maybe they would, as you know, there's islands. Taiwan has islands close to China. Kinmen Islands, for example, are very close to mainland China. So yes, for example, if they surrounded those islands, even as far as the Penghu Islands, which is about halfway between Taiwan and mainland, yes, those would be problematic. The reason why I don't think that's a good strategy for them, because it shows their hand. It shows, and it could cause the United States and other countries to ramp up support for Taiwan, and it gives Taiwan the opportunity to get reinforcements and supplies. But I'm not saying it can't be done. But it's definitely a possibility. But I'm just saying I'm providing a counter to that idea. But in terms of Taiwan building a blockade, let's say a sea blockade at first, and then maybe an air blockade, that can be done. And especially with their missiles from mainland that could strike anywhere around Taiwan, that means all ships at sea would be at risk. In addition to that, if they have their Navy out there floating around and warning ships away, and also during this exercise, I think today there were 51 flights that were rerouted, that were either taking off or coming to Taiwan because of this exercise, because the planes couldn't fly through. So this exercise did have an effect. It is unusual in the fact that airplanes had to be rerouted, and also it affected Japan. Japan was very upset because some of the areas that China decided to use as exercise locations crossed into Japan's economic exclusive zone. This wasn't just a Taiwan scenario. It was also a Japanese scenario, and the Japanese were very upset. But most press is not covering that aspect. Obviously, in Japanese press it is, but most of the world is focused on the Taiwan crisis. But as you know, the I can't pronounce it, Senkaku Islands.
Sentaku?
Senkaku.
Senkaku? Or I always call them the Diaoyu Islands.
Okay.
Okay, we know who the CCP guy is. Okay, we know who that guy is. All right, Matt, I got you. But anyway, the Japanese are very concerned about that because the CCP claims those islands as theirs, just like they claim all the South China Sea. And they've drawn their 9-dash line to include those islands, those Japanese islands. Um, Luckily, the Japanese have and the U.S. have sent military personnel to those islands to reinforce them, to make a statement to the PLA. And so this whole big picture that occurred makes the Japanese more upset about China and question looking into their defense needs. And I think, I'm hoping, I mean, I might be extreme, but I'm hoping that the Japanese people realize that, maybe they need to have nuclear weapons in Japan. Now, they could be U.S. nuclear weapons, or some kind of combination. As you know, in Europe, we have nuclear weapons in Germany and other countries. And so right now, I think the Japanese public is concerned about China. The same goes for South Korea. South Korea is concerned about North Korea and also China. I wouldn't be surprised in the future if there's a shift in policy in that arena.